Hey, friends, I have a real treat for you today. I am interviewing Mandy Hood, and Mandy is the co-founder of The Connection, a community-based women's ministry. She loves to share the story of how God used an introvert like her and how he can use you too when you dare to say yes. So, Mandy, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Carol. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So, can you tell the listener just a little bit more about you?
Okay, so I live in a small town, Waynesboro, Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
kind of in the middle of nowhere, and town square and Christmas tree right in the middle of the street and all that kind of thing.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's a nice, sweet little town. I married my high school sweetheart 43 years ago,
I did too.
and oh,
Not 40,
probably not 43 years ago, but
38 years ago
all
though,
right,
so
okay.
we're close.
You've been around a while.
Yeah.
And we have two adult children, and they're both married, and we have three teenage grandsons.
Wow. Oh,
So
all boys, huh?
all boys, brothers.
That's exciting.
Yes, there's always excitement when they're around.
So you have kind
Yeah.
of an unusual story of how God worked in your life and something that God brought you to that you never even thought about, never even had an inkling of what he might have you do. And so I want you to share your journey. And as we go through this, I want women to think about their own lives and think about how they see themselves and the possibilities that God might be laying on their hearts and to pay attention where when we share your story, where the Holy Spirit's kind of tugging at your heart. So, Mandy, let's share your story with the listener.
Okay. So I've always been very quiet, very much an introvert. Um, in the background, behind the scenes. I like being the support person. And for 24 years, I worked as an office administrator, made sure everybody else had what they needed to do their jobs. And I was in the background. And it's probably my first big change would have been when my kids were teenagers. And there was someone that spoke at our church about the local crisis pregnancy center. And I was just like instantly all fired up and just like ran out to the Narthex and grabbed every piece of paperwork she had out there and read everything and told my husband that afternoon, I'm signing up to help.
Mm.
And and he's like, okay, because I was completely out of character for me and went through the training and ended up becoming what at that time was called a peer counselor. And I actually worked one-on-one with the young girls who were the same age as my children. So
Wow.
it was, I could understand how a little bit about how what they're going through at that age because of
Yeah.
what I was going through. But I mean that was just completely out of character for me because I never would have done something like that, and it's just one of those things. I just knew I had to do it, and I did that for 11 years, volunteered there along with a full-time job and raising two teenagers and everything else. And then as time went on, I started feeling led to learn more about leadership. And I started feeling that God had something else for me. Didn't know what it was. And I just kept trying to keep my eyes open. It's like, okay, you got another job for me, something else. Just tell me where to go. And I'm like looking through the one ads in the newspaper was what she did then. And just tried to keep my eyes open and do whatever. And in the meantime, I've just started really desiring to attend workshops and webinars and things like that on leadership and business and just a whole different direction than what I was used to. And then after this went on for like a few years, and then finally one day I told God, I said, if you want me to do this, you're gonna have to give me some kind of clue what I'm looking for because I got nothing here. So he did. He gave me a few hints. He said it was going to be in ministry, it was going to be working with women, and it was going to be planning events.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. So I'm very type A. So I started, trying to analyze what that could be, what that could look like. And of course, you can never guess what God's up to.
No.
Uh, yeah. But I tried anyway, and still some time passed. And then eventually one day, it was kind of struggling with my job, and I was just feeling like I was just feeling the urge to move on. But after you're there so many years, it's like that's a pretty big decision to
Yeah,
step
it
away
is.
from. And so I just spent a lot of time praying about it one day, and it was just like, God, what do is this the time? Is I can't decide, what's right. I don't want to do the wrong thing. And I kept praying about it, and then I got up from there, went over and I checked my email, and there was an email with that said job opportunity.
You're
And
like,
it was from
okay.
the crisis pregnancy center that I had worked for. And I opened it up, and it was for fundraising and events coordinator. So it was with women in ministry and planning events. And I'm like, well, okay. This is just too easy. This doesn't seem right. I don't know. And so I went back, prayed some more, and threw out a fleece and said, a couple of things. I said, if this is what you want, you have to take care of this point. You have to take care of this point, because I just have to be sure. And God took care of everything that I had asked. And so I turned in my resignation, 2 weeks resignation, and sent in an application. So I quit my job after 24 years, walked away from a third of our household income,
Oh, wow.
and hadn't even had a job interview yet. So I knew that
Wow.
I needed to leave. I just didn't know if for sure if that was where I was to be, but I just knew that I knew that I knew that
Yeah,
it was time to go. So that was a pretty big step.
that was
And thing.
huge.
Yeah, yeah, it was. So I went back and forth between being exhilarated. It's like, wow, this is it. God's got something big for me. And like, oh no, how are we going to pay the bills? I mean, what about this? And we'll never go on vacation again. And we'll,
Oh,
I'm
wow.
going to have to like buy all generic hair products. And, you start thinking about all these things like, okay, now what did I do? Um, but I just kind of went back and forth, and, it all worked out somehow. And sometimes God's got a special math when it comes to multiplying your time and multiplying your funds when you're faithful. And that's what he did. He stepped up. So I ended up I did get that job. It was for 10 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week.
Oh,
And
wow.
working for a nonprofit, the pay scale is not the same as a for-profit. So it
Yeah.
was still a huge decrease pay wise, but it was awesome. And I learned a lot through working there, learned how to do fundraising, and learned a lot
Yeah.
about planning events
I
and
was
all
going
of
to
that.
ask, I was going to ask you about that because so I would be really excited working with women, doing events, but the
Mhm.
fundraising, man, some people they love doing stuff like that, but
Mhm.
I hate asking anybody for anything. So was that hard
Yeah.
as an introvert to do?
It's a definitely a different mindset when you have to go out to businesses and say, "Will you sponsor an ad?" And you don't know, especially working in the pro-life
Oh,
ministry,
yeah.
you don't know the hearts and minds of everybody you're speaking with. You
Yeah.
don't know what you're going to be met with. And so yeah, that was a tough part of the job, going out and door
That's
to door. But
That's intimidating. I was on the
yeah.
yearbook staff when I was in high school, and I
Okay.
loved every part of it except when they sent us out to sell yearbook ads. I was
Yep.
like, can somebody else
Yeah.
do this? But I remember I
Yeah.
went to the YMCA. I was just desperate. I was just wherever. And the guy was so rude. And he was like, you know that we're a nonprofit and you're asking us for money. I was a high school kid. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
that really it's like I don't ever want to ask anybody for money for anything again. So yeah, that would be
Yeah.
a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, that was tough. And I had some training and helped me work through that and learn, the ways to go about it and that sort of thing. So, but a couple of years into that, I, again went through this big change and stirring, and I was feeling the need to bring women together to connect with each other. And I was a couple of good friends and I were trying to plan some events and do some things like that for Christian women. And we ended up we planned a weekend retreat. And at this weekend retreat, we had women there that were from all these different churches, and some weren't attending any church at all. They had a bad situation and they had kind of walked away from church, but they came to our retreat. And there were all different ages. There was a mom with a brand new baby that came. There were grandmas. And it was just a little bit of everything there. And we just kind of sat back and saw how beautiful this was. All these different women from all these different walks coming together because uh, sorry, gonna cry.
No, that's
Because they loved Jesus and they wanted to be together. And it was just an amazing thing. And after that weekend, we just knew that we needed to do something. And so we started what became eventually a nonprofit. We're a 501(c)(3). It's called The Connection. And we have all sorts of opportunities for women to come together. It doesn't matter what church you go to or if you don't go to church. If you're not even sure what you believe, we don't care. Everybody is welcome, and we're not separated by the walls of our individual churches.
yeah. So let me ask
And
you,
it's
you said you felt the need to bring women together. So is there like any one thing that happened, or was there something going on that really made you start thinking about that?
um, well, I was through my church, I was facilitating small groups for women, and we just kind of wanted to do more. We wanted to do more social things, but the church that we attended had a simple church model, Sunday morning service and small groups, and they really didn't want to have a lot of other things going on. And so we did what we could to kind of do things under the radar a little bit. And the women just, you could just tell the women just really desired to be together, and they just wanted that, and they wanted more, and they wanted more. But our church wasn't interested in that. And I was talking to another friend and said, yeah, I've got this desire to bring women together, and my church just, they're not interested. And that's their journey, that, and nothing wrong with that. But I just had this desire, and she said, well, you don't have to do ministry in a church.
Mm,
And that was just a light bulb moment there. It just never dawned on me.
yeah.
Um, so that kind of rattled around in my brain for a couple of years before we got to the point where we said, now's the time.
So why do you
So
think that women are so desperate to gather?
I don't know, because I'm such an introvert. I'd be happy to stay on my couch with a cup of tea and just never leave. That's just me. I enjoy getting together, but I can be socially awkward, so that's kind of,
Oh, me
so I've
too.
I've got
Yeah.
kind of a mix there. But um, if you look at the Bible, we're just built that way. We're built for connection. Um, Jesus said, the two greatest things you can do is love God with all your heart and to love others. And to love others, you have to be with them. You have to connect with them.
Good point. Yeah.
So that's like number two thing that as a Christian we're supposed to be doing anyway. And I recently heard these statistics. I'm going to have to read it because I won't remember. But the
Uh-huh.
Surgeon General of the United States said that loneliness, isolation, and lack of connection are now considered public health crises.
Wow.
And they're right up there with smoking and other addictions and things like that in their minds, as far as the Surgeon General is concerned. And the physical consequences of poor or insufficient connection include 29% increased risk of heart disease,
Wow.
32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increased risk of developing dementia when you're older.
50%.
Yeah. So get out there. Get
Yeah.
off your get off your couches or invite somebody to come in and sit on the couch with you. So, yeah, it's physically very important, not just emotionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know when I was a young mom, our church had monthly, we called them circle group meetings, and
Mhm.
they had them kind of divided in ages. There were like three big ones in our church. And I remember I looked forward to those nights once a month so much. And me and a friend of mine, a lot of times we ended up at somebody's house normally, and then we'd stand out in the parking lot talking till 11 or 12 o'clock at night because we were just so desperate for human
Mhm.
interaction besides,
Yeah.
our little kids. So I think
Yeah.
it's important.
Yes, definitely when you're in those stages because, yeah, you really crave adult conversation.
Yeah, you really do.
Yeah.
But I
Mhm.
know, I mean, a lot of women are introvert. I mean, like I said, I'm an introvert too, and it's
Okay.
hard to step out and be the
Mhm.
one. And I know I was at a MOPS group several years back, and they wanted me to talk about friendship. And I have two friends, Julie and Frida, that we've been friends now for 29 years. And so I brought my two friends with me to this MOPS group meeting. And I remember there was one mom that was there, and she said she was shy too. And she said, "What do I have to do? How do I?" She said, "I'm so lonely, but I don't know how to do it."
Mhm.
And I said, "Listen, if somebody invites you somewhere, if there's something going on at the church or some other community thing that you think you
Mhm.
might be interested in, it's hard. It is so
Yes.
hard to step
Mhm.
out as an introvert. But those are some things that really God can use to minister to us,
Mhm.
and then we can turn around and we can minister to others as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's very important.
And I think we do forget that we're not the only ones that are feeling like that.
Yeah.
There's so many out there. In fact, some of my introvert friends and I said, "Well, we should get together and have an introverts club," but nobody would show up because we'd want to
Yeah.
stay at home. But yeah, it's hard. And one thing that has helped me is I'm not comfortable just going and attending something and standing around and making small talk.
Oh, no.
I feel so awkward and I don't know what to do with myself. But when I'm serving,
Yeah.
whether it's planning or I'm greeting at the door or helping with the food, I have a purpose
Yeah.
and then I'm more comfortable. Or I know it's my job to seek out and see, is there somebody new here today that doesn't have anybody to talk to, and I'll go talk to them.
Yeah.
Um, but if I just went and showed up, I'd be in a corner somewhere.
Yeah.
But serving really helps and makes a difference there. So
I agree. And there's so many things that, you know, I did women's ministry for a good while, and it ended up we left the church because it so much of it, and it was probably partly my fault because I hate asking people to help, but it got to the point where it was all on me, and I was so exhausted. I was so burnt out. And my husband's like, "That's it. We're leaving. We're going." And this was a church that he had grown up in, his parents had grown up in, his grandparents had, I think, grown up
oh,
in too. And so it was real. I didn't want to leave. It was really,
yeah.
really hard to do that. And then when we did go to another church, I I didn't do anything for a long time because I
Mhm.
was just so, and you kind of get hurt too when you, I guess some, and like I said, part of it was my fault because I should have asked more people, but then you felt like, gosh, can people not just say, "Hey, can I help?" But a lot of times they just won't.
They don't, or sometimes they don't realize,
Right. Yeah.
if they don't know the need, they don't know there's a need. So,
Right. And I should have been
mm,
a lot more vocal about sharing that. But after a while, God started, working on me, and now I'm doing this podcast for women. Totally different thing than what I've done in the past. But
yeah.
so as you think about, I mean, share a little bit more about the connection and what that
Okay.
is and how
Okay.
it has grown in the last 7 years.
Okay. Well, let's see, we have book clubs, we have Bible studies, we have workshops, we have weekend retreats, of course. We've done some conferences. We have a weekly Thursday morning Bible study that's ongoing. They just sit down and they work through one chapter of the Bible a week. And we have a daily live devotion on Facebook,
Uh-huh.
Monday through Fridays. We have once a month, you can come in for a coffee and just sit down and talk. We have a facility now where they can come and meet. And we just have all sorts of things going on. We have some things that are just purely social. We get together for breakfast or in a restaurant or something like that. But we have a mentoring program. That's also very, very important, very big
Yeah.
thing. So, yeah, we've got all kinds of things going on all the time, in person, online. We have a widows group. About a year and a half ago, we realized that we had several widows within our ladies that attend regularly in person.
Uh-huh.
So we asked for one of them to kind of be the leader, so to speak. And she just gets them together every now and then because they've got their own special needs and
Right.
situations that if you've not been a widow yourself, you just don't understand.
Right.
And so we have that ministry in person, and then we have a Facebook group for widows called Christ-Centered Widows. So you could search for that. And we have over 300 women in that, and they're from all over the world
Wow, I have to put a
have
link
joined
to
in.
that in the show notes
Yeah.
because
Okay.
we were talking before we started recording, and I recently, well, just this week, interviewed a widow who's written a book, and the things that she shared, because I've known her for several years, we were in a writing group together, and she would write about some of the challenges that widows have just in social situations. And
Yes.
I never, like, it never would have crossed my mind some of the things that
Mhm.
she's had written about. So I think it's such an important ministry, and that's
Yeah.
what the Bible says, the widows and the orphans, we're
Mhm.
supposed to take care of them. So
Yeah.
I think that is awesome. And then
Yeah.
you did for a while have an outreach to younger women. Is that right?
Yeah, for a while we had a monthly program called Embrace, and we met in a local coffee shop. It was run by Christians, and they allowed us to come in one day a month shortly after they closed. And it was just kind of a nice, cool atmosphere because
Yeah.
when you're trying to reach the 20 somethings, atmosphere is number one.
Yeah.
And so that was good. We had some live music, and it was led by women that were a little younger. The the musical talent, they were in their 20s also, and that was a really great thing and well attended. And then COVID hit,
Ah,
and so that didn't work out, and the coffee shop had to change their hours, and it didn't. So that kind of went by the wayside. But that was an awesome thing that we had going on there. In more recent times, we brought together a focus group with women in their 20s and just sat them down and we just asked them, what they're interested in, what their needs are, what don't they like. That, is there something in particular about the connection that you do or you don't like? Maybe there's something, terminology or something we use that just like,
yeah.
and we got really good response, and we had really nice conversation with them, and we stayed in touch with those ladies. One of them has, actually, probably more than one of them have led Bible studies for us. So when you ask someone their opinion, they feel a little more invested, a little more interested, and so we've seen those ladies become more involved. One of them moved out of the area, but the other ones have all become more involved, and they know their opinions are respected, and
That's
so we.
so just curious, what kind of things did they say that they were interested in?
Well, it was surprising some of the things. They wanted to do like workshop kind of things, uh, some things like that. They didn't like doing anything later in the evening. They wanted to be done by 8:30 because they
Oh,
or earlier. 8 o'clock would have been good, with them. And it's like, okay, I figured you could stay up later than
I
that.
know.
But that was kind of surprising. So yeah, it was really interesting to sit down and just talk to them. And you spend time trying to figure out what somebody's thinking. Well, let's just ask.
Yeah, that's a good point. So
Yeah.
what kind of workshops and were they in person or online?
They were not interested in online things, which that really surprised me.
Yeah,
Yeah, they wanted to do more online things, crafty things.
in-person things.
Yeah, in person. They wanted opportunity to connect with each other and to, yeah, just like
So
everybody else.
so they did want to do crafty things?
Yes. Hmm.
Because that's surprising because I thought that
Yeah.
younger
Well,
women didn't want to do things like that.
yeah. That's what I would have thought too. And I guess it all depends on, maybe they don't want to do certain kinds of crafts, but
Right.
things that interest them, something cute and
Cool
useful or
crafts.
whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some kind of home decor things and that kind of thing. So paint nights and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And I love that you're getting the feedback from the women. So
Mhm.
I know that you were a little older when you started into this ministry. And I
Mhm.
know when my kids, when my daughter, my oldest, went to college, or right before she went to college, I really started feeling like I was, I drew house plans. I did that, for a long time. And I did that out of my home. So I was
Okay.
still doing that, but
Mhm.
I wanted to have more purpose. We had left our church at that point, and so I kind of felt lost and I wasn't sure. Sometimes you feel like, okay, this is it. God doesn't have anything else for me. And at that time I was like, I don't know, 46 or 47. I
Yeah.
wasn't
Your life's
very old.
over. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now it's like, oh gosh, Carol, wow, you had still so, I hope, still so much life to live and have
Yeah.
lived a lot since then. I mean,
Yeah.
that's been like 12 years ago. So, I know you said you felt God drawing you, but did you ever feel as your kids got older that like maybe there was something missing or maybe you were losing your purpose or anything like that? Did you ever deal with that?
I think that's about that time was when he started like drawing me into working with a crisis pregnancy center and then coming into this ministry. And then I think he was working on filling that void before I knew I had it.
Ah,
And so, it, um, sometimes my kids look at me and they're like, "You did what?" And it's because I'm not the person that I was when they were living at home because I've gotten involved in doing these other things that are just so out of character for me. I'm sure kids slow me and you're not in the day of it. You have you have more energy to look around and think about things and do things where when you're busy, getting dinner on the table and getting to sports or whatever else you got going on, that's your focus.
yeah,
So I would say if you're coming on that stage of life, look forward to it. I mean, it's the end of one era. You're
right.
starting a new era of a relationship with your children. But it's your time. I got married. I was still 19, actually. I was almost 20. So, I left home, got married, and ended up having my first baby like a year and a half into
Oh,
my marriage. It was
wow.
like, we had a 5-year plan, but
Yeah,
that didn't
sometimes
work
those
out.
don't work. We
No.
had a 5-year plan too, but I
Yeah.
ended up dealing with infertility for 2 years. So it ended up
Oh,
being a 7-year plan instead.
okay.
So
Well, mine went the other direction.
yeah.
So it's like we never had that opportunity to be a young married couple or, somebody in your 20s with free time and going,
Yeah.
it was just, straight into full life. By the time I was 25, I was married, living 2 hours away from my family and had two kids. So, I didn't have time to explore and think about who I was and what I wanted to be. I was just doing it.
Yeah.
So now I have that time and it's been good. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's
I'd say
good.
just keep your eyes open and I think when things really started changing for me was when I just like got down on my knees with God and just said, "Tell me what you want me to do. I'll do whatever you want to do." And that just kind of opened the door whenever you give him that permission, he'll take care of it from there. So,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I was listening to you share your story about that, and you had mentioned about you had read the book. I think you had read the book by Corey Ten Boom, and that's
Mhm.
what prompted that. So,
Hiding
can
place.
you share that part of your story?
Ooh, okay. So, I was in my early 40s and I read The Hiding Place by Corey Ten Boom. And if you don't know her story, she was about the same age that I was at the time that I read the book. And she had lived with her parents her whole life. And she worked in her family watch shop, which was in the same building. So she didn't even like have to leave the house to go to work. Everything was there, very quiet life in this little town, and that was all she had. She never married, never had children. And then the Nazis moved in. She was I think it was in the Netherlands or somewhere. And they moved in and she started hiding Jews and put together basically an underground railroad and to get these people to safety and to provide for their needs. And she went out and they found ways to get ration cards so they could feed, something you don't think
Yeah.
about. And at that time, everything was rationed and they had to feed, they were helping to hide all these people. They had to
Yeah,
feed
they
them.
only had what, three people in their home, so
Yeah, yeah. So she was doing all these things, just, going from walking downstairs to fix a watch to putting together all this and you know just hiding people in farms and wherever they could and she organized this whole um I don't even know what you would want to call it, but just network, guess is the word I'm searching for. This whole network of people that could help and to hide them and it was just amazing. And she was my age and just like that, God turned her life into, very quiet, dull, nothing special into this amazing thing. And then she went on, eventually she was captured and went to a concentration camp. She even led ministry in the camp. They were hidden by bed bugs.
yeah.
The guards wouldn't go in because there were bed bugs, and they led Bible studies in there. And then once she got out of there, she went on to be an author and a speaker and traveled all over the world doing public speaking. And so all of this was in her later years,
Right.
when a lot of people think their lives are over and
Yeah.
she was just getting started. And I thought, well, if she could do that, then maybe my life isn't always going to be this way. And so then that's when I prayed the big scary prayer and said, I'll do whatever you want. And he said, okay.
Then he answered it in a really big way. I
He
mean,
did. Look, he baby stepped me into it. He didn't, he knew better than to shock me, give me too much at once. But yeah, little baby steps. And yeah, so.
so I mean, it's really incredible how so you said the first retreat, that was the first event you did was a retreat. And how
Mhm.
many women did you have come to that? Do you
I
remember?
think 25.
Okay. I mean, that's a good number. So how did you promote it if you didn't, I mean, you didn't do it
Well,
in the church, or how did you do
well,
it?
it was that one was actually through the church somehow. I still don't know how they allowed me to do it, but they said we could do it, and so it was through the church. So the church helped put it together and promoted it, and our church was in a big upheaval at that time, so a lot of people had left the church in the midst of this from when we started promoting it until it happened.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people had left the church. and I think about 50% of the people walked away from the church at the time. Yeah,
Wow.
it was a really tough time, and that's part of what made it so special too. That, all these ladies that had gone to church with us and were scattered elsewhere, they still came to the retreat because they
Oh,
wanted to be together,
yeah.
and they wanted to be part of that community, whether they were sitting together on Sunday mornings or not. And that's part of the beauty of it, that we don't have to sit next to somebody on a Sunday morning to be friends with them, or to learn about Jesus together. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
I
have too
agree.
many other things in common. It doesn't matter where we sit on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And
And
it's the connection is not a replacement for church.
no,
We definitely not that. We have over 30 different churches represented and ladies that attend locally. And everyone in leadership has their own home church that they go to.
that
So,
is awesome. I know when I was listening to you on another podcast, the lady was had known you in your ministry, and she was
mhm.
saying what I think I can't remember exactly how she worded it, but there was a question that I don't know, she had heard somebody ask, and it was like, if
Well,
whatever you do didn't exist, would anybody know the difference? And
yes.
she said, for your ministry being
Hmm.
or her having been in your town, she said
Hmm.
it definitely there would be a hole, there would be something
Hmm.
missing because this ministry,
Yes.
if it wasn't there. And
Yeah.
I think that is like such an honor for somebody to say that about a ministry that God laid on your heart and
Hmm.
how it is really impacting women for
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
I was just
Yeah.
impressed with that.
Yeah, and like I said, it is a small town, but and you would think that being a ministry, that the average person in the town wouldn't even know who we are, what we are, what we do. But we're getting more known. What That was one of our goals early on, was to be a household name, and and not to bring glory to us, but
Right.
to bring glory to God and what He's done. But one thing that we've done for quite a while is we tithe 10% of all of our gifts that come in and profits from events, and we put that aside and we give that back to the community or
Oh,
use it to
wow.
serve other women. And so we have college scholarships that we offer. We offer
Wow.
three college scholarships to local school districts. And one thing we did a couple of years ago was we really wanted to do something for the community itself. So we have 40 banners that hang on lampposts on Main Street. They put them up a couple of months at a time, and then they'll take them down, put them back up, and they have encouraging messages on them.
Oh,
And they don't have our name on them, but they're branded with our colors and our logo.
uh-huh.
And so there's some of them are just for fun, like, eat dessert first or something like that. And then there's others that are, we sneak a little scripture in there,
Uh,
because it's downtown, you got to be careful. So
yeah.
there's love one another, forgive, be strong and courageous. Definite, straight scripture, but it's not obvious in your face that we're able to get that passed. So there's 40 of these banners on Main Street, and we hear over and over again what a blessing that they are to the people that drive by. We had a lady even write us a letter and say how much she appreciated it. She lives in another town, and she was driving through and having a bad day and saw the banners and how much they uplifted her. So, we do what we can. For a while, we helped with faith-based movies at the movie theater. We took taken a break from that, but we did
How,
that for a couple of
how do
years.
you help? How do you do that? How do you help with the movies?
Well, we helped with promotion. We added volunteers for that. We do prizes sometimes. They do a drawing for anybody that attended. Um, yeah, and they give us some um, promotion on the back end. So that was nice.
Well, I like that you really think outside the box. These are things that I mean, I never would have thought about that. When you mentioned the banners, So I live in a really small town too. And of course, they have the banners, but several years
Mhm,
ago, they decided for Veterans Day, they were going to let veterans' families sponsor the
mhm,
banner post, and you could have your loved one's picture and their
mhm,
rank and where they served and all that on the
yep,
banners. And
mhm.
my dad had just passed away
Oh.
Christmas before, and he was I always get emotional. Gosh, I don't mean to. But he
It's
had served
okay.
in Vietnam, and
Oh,
he always, you see a lot of older men, they wear the cap that says,
yep.
Vietnam vet or
Mhm,
whatever. He always was proud to say. So, my dad's birthday is October the 9th, and so that was right before Veterans Day, because they celebrated it the whole month of November.
mhm,
So for my mom's birthday, for my dad's birthday, my brother and sister and I bought a banner for my mom.
mhm,
And that was so meaningful. And you can go
mhm.
down the street and you can see,
Yeah.
you recognize some of the names. Most of them have passed away, but it
Mhm,
is like a real honor for the some of them are still alive, and you could see them on
yeah.
Facebook, they'd have their picture made, underneath their banner. It was just a really cool idea and a way to
Mhm,
honor people, and you don't mind spending money on stuff like that because
mhm.
it's it's something that means a lot to your
Yep.
loved ones. So,
Yeah.
I know we did not come on here to talk about that,
That's
but when you
okay.
said that, I was like, I
Mhm.
never would have thought about purchasing banners and putting them down the street with encouraging words on them. I mean, that is
Yep.
very unique. And who came? Did
Yeah.
you come up with that?
No, it was someone else on our team. It was actually our fifth birthday, and we wanted to do something to give back, and somebody threw that idea out there, and we're like, yeah, that's us. So we talked to the Main Street manager and said, "What do you think?" And he's also a Christian, so he was like, "Yeah." He said, "We have to have final approval, but he said, as long as they look good, you can do it." And he said, "I know you guys will," because he's very supportive about it with us.
That's
And
awesome.
so, yeah,
That is so cool. Yeah, I want to
yeah,
know all the other ideas that you because that my heart is my community because we moved to Fountain
Mhm.
Inn when I was 14, and it was kind of a turning point in my life, and I met my husband right after we moved here. Of course, he was
Okay.
my boyfriend then, but we dated for 5.5 years before we got married, and so that is part of my mission too. I want to pour back into the community because
Mhm.
it's meant a lot to me and to
Yeah.
my family too. And so I just know there's probably women out there who they think, well, I don't have anything to give. I don't know what
Mhm.
I could do to, in ministry or to support a community or that
Yeah.
God could use me for anything.
Yeah.
So, what would you
Yeah.
say
That's
to those ladies?
Well, that's exactly how I felt. And I just
Yeah,
felt like I had nothing special to offer. And I don't by myself, but
right.
when God's behind it, he takes care of that. Um, Gideon is like my hero. If you
Yeah.
remember the story of Gideon, and he was like hiding in a wine press, I think it was, trying to do what he could and not get captured or murdered or whatever. And then angel of the Lord came and said, "You're going to lead an army." And he's like,
Yeah. It's like,
no,
well,
I don't think
wait,
so.
what? You don't know who I
No.
am.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And then God said, "Well, you go in the strength that you have, for I am with you."
Oh,
And just kind of try to follow that. And then if you read the whole story of Gideon, he started out with this army of I forget how many, but God's like, "Nah, that's too many."
yeah,
And he whittled it down and nah, get rid of some more. And so he went down to like nothing. I mean,
yeah. Like,
even though he had no skills that he thought of, no talent, no experience, he didn't even have the men, but God. created or pulled it together, and they won the battle
Yeah.
against all logic. And
Yeah.
that's just what's happened here. And if you allow God to do what he wants to do, he'll do that with you too.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Mhm.
And I started doing women's ministry. And so God, you know, I heard Emily Freeman say something one time, and it really stuck with me. She said, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that you're going to have to do it the rest of your life or that you will do it the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And that has really spoken to me, especially as I was doing this podcast. And when I started, I was also drawing house plans too and trying to do a podcast. It was weekly and now it's every other week, but I was trying to keep up with my work and do the podcast. And I
Mhm.
literally thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown. I couldn't do it
Aw.
all. And so I was in Bible study one night and we were talking about balance. And it just all came out. I was just pouring out my heart. I'm like, I can't figure out how to do this. And so a lady had come in late and had not heard me say any of this. And so before we started the lesson, my best friend was one of the leaders in the group. And she said, Carol, after we finish, we're going to pray over you. And so they did. She did that and they all laid their hands on me and prayed. And the girl that came in late, she said, after the prayer was over, she looked at me and she said, Carol, she said, I have no idea what this means, but God just said to tell you to let it go. And I was
Mhm.
like, and I knew it wasn't the podcast. I knew because I love drawing houses. That is my passion. That's why I went into it.
Mhm.
But it was hard. And then sometime around that time, I heard Emily Freeman say that. And I was like, okay, God, just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're going to do it the rest of your life. And
Mhm.
so I had to give it, it was like, it still hurts that I don't get to do that anymore. But I get to do this podcast and
There
hopefully
you
I
go.
can minister to more women in that way. So just
Mhm.
because you're in a season of one thing doesn't mean it's going to be something that's just like you having to leave your job.
Mhm.
You were supposed to leave that job, so much
Yeah.
so that you quit before you even had another job. That's
Yep.
when you really know God's telling you something.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to know that God has something for every one of us. He has
Yes.
a purpose for each
Mhm.
of us. And if we don't think that we can do it, we probably can't because, God used Gideon. Gideon couldn't do
Yeah.
anything, but
Mhm.
he can, with him working in us, he loves to use weak things to show his
Yes.
power and might.
Yes. Yes.
So,
For sure. Something came to mind as you were talking there. Don't feel like you, your God thing has to be some huge thing.
right.
Don't overlook the little things, whether it's mentoring a young mom
Yeah.
or just, being supportive to somebody one on one or whatever it is, or maybe in your phase of life, it is just being the best mom you can
Right.
to your kids or the best wife you can or a friend or whatever. Um, it doesn't necessarily have to be something big. Just be open and be willing to do whatever.
I agree. I struggled a lot when my kids were little because I wanted to do it right. I didn't want to mess up. You're so fearful
Mhm.
as a young mom, like, how are my kids going to turn out? What if I mess up and they're going to end up in prison or you think about all those crazy things that
Mhm.
I mean, and so it made me get on my knees a lot more. It made me dig into the word more
Mhm.
and, have my devotional time and try to learn as much as I could about how to be a good mom and a good wife.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, if we do those things, those are God honoring things that
Yes, absolutely.
that have an impact. I mean, you look at Susanna Wesley, who I don't even know how many children that woman had. 20, I think, and maybe 10.
I
I
don't
don't even
know.
know how many lived to adulthood, but the impact, I mean, she changed the world through the teaching,
Mhm.
what she taught her sons, that is just,
Yes.
John Wesley and Charles Wesley and um, John Wesley was Presbyterian. I don't know which faith that he is one of the
Mhm.
Protestant faiths that he
Yes.
established. And
Yeah.
then Charles, wrote so many beautiful hymns and that draw people to God. And that mama just
Mhm.
prayed. She was faithful to pray every
Mhm.
single day.
Yep.
And those boys remembered that too. They
Mhm.
said, she would pull her apron up over her head while the kids were running
Yeah.
crazy around her and said, "Don't bother me right now because I'm praying." But I think that's such a
Yeah.
picture of how we feel sometimes that, our kids, we're like they're losing control and we're losing control and we don't know what to do. And
Just throw your apron over your head and pray.
yeah, just throw an apron over your head and start praying. So, but I think that's a really good point, and I'm glad you said that because you don't have to do something, and you don't know
Mhm.
what the impact it could
Mhm.
have, just like you stepping out
Yep.
and
Yep.
doing this ministry.
Yep.
So I just appreciate that. So you've written a book about
Yep.
your journey and how you started this
Mhm.
ministry, which is also something that if other women feel called to do something like that, they can
Mhm.
use this kind of as a guidebook. Can you
Yep.
share a little bit about that?
Yeah. It just started basically as a diary. When you were talking and saying I should have written down what
Yeah.
I did, and that's what I did. I just felt that I needed to write what we were doing, and at the beginning, I had no idea what it was. Well, what it was going to be used for. I just knew I needed to write it down so I could remember, or it could be accurate record or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And about a year or so after I started writing it, we had a couple of ladies move out of our area, and they decided they wanted to start their own version of the connection there. So I gave it to them and said, here, read this. Maybe there's something in there you could find helpful. And they just loved it. They said that there were things that they put into use. There were things they wish they had known sooner.
Oh,
And so we thought, well, if they found it helpful, then maybe others could find it helpful too. And so we kept praying over it for a couple of years, just trying to figure out how to get the word out there, what to do. And I just, add a little something to it every now and then. And then finally, a little over a year ago, we, kind of had the light bulb moment and, well, let's put it into the format of a book and self-publish on Amazon. And then it's out there for everybody to see.
yeah. And what's the
So,
name of it?
yeah. The name of it is Let's Get Together, the story of a unique women's ministry. And
Okay.
Let's Get Together comes from our key verse, which is Hebrews 10:25. Let us not give up getting together as some people do, but encourage one another.
That's
And
great.
so,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
so
love
that's
that
what the
verse.
name. Yeah. And then we thought, well, we don't do anything halfway, so we decided to create a journal too
Uh-huh.
that complements it, and it's called Let's Make Plans. Let's Make Plans Journal to Discover God's Plan for You.
Ah.
And so it has some quotes from the book, and it has some scripture and writing prompts to help you kind of process if you've got something that you feel God's telling you to do, to help you work through that and lead you step by step through that.
And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a women's ministry. It's just for whatever
Nope.
guys.
Any any kind of ministry, nonprofit, any dream that you have. One of our ladies, she'd already read the book. She had the journal but hadn't used it. And she said, there's something that's God's been working on me. And I just needed to flesh it out. She said, I started to grab my regular journal and start making notes. And then I remembered I've got I've got Let's Make Plans. So she pulled that out and she's, starting to work through that and process her dream, what God has given to her. So yeah, it could be anything. It's specific to that. And the book too, if you're thinking of women's ministry, but profit or you're a good, it just lays out
Okay,
how
so
we got started.
you went
And
out just a little bit. I'm sorry. Can you say that
oh,
again? The
okay.
internet kind of is going in and out.
So the book Let's Get Together is not just for somebody that is planning on creating a ministry or a nonprofit. It's also a good God story.
Uh-huh.
Tells how we, have been blessed over and over again, and God is just using what's going on. So it's just a little more expanded version of our talk today.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
So,
available on Amazon. Both books are.
okay. And then, so if anybody wants to find out more or follow you, or I know, so do you, it seems like in the book, do people like, can they take this model and do it in their own? Like, is there a
We
connection
can
for y'all to do that, or how does that work?
Sure, we would love that. We think that would be the coolest thing, just to have other little baby connections just spread up all over the country. That I think that would be amazing. We don't do franchises, but but yeah, if there's anything, if you're feeling called to that, and you think that would be helpful, go for it. We'd love to talk to anybody that's interested in doing something like that, or just starting something on their own. When we got started, we didn't really have anybody that we could talk to. There was no model we could follow with what we were
Yeah.
doing, and we just felt kind of alone and out there. So we thought, with this book, if nothing else, it would give other people in that same place just encouragement to know that, oh, somebody else has felt these things and gone through these things. And we'd love to start some kind of networking. If there's anybody out there that would be interested in just reaching out, and we can learn from each other and support each other, I think that would be awesome.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. I think that's a great thing that you're offering to help people with. So if
Yeah.
they want to, say if they did want to
Hmm.
say, "Hey, can you help me? Can you
Yeah.
give me some
Yeah.
ideas or whatever?" How would they get in touch with you?
Okay. Our email address is connectingwomenwithgod@gmail.com.
Okay.
And you could also visit our website to learn more about us, which is connectingwomenwithgod.com. And you can get contact us through there too. And all our events are on there. We do have some online things.
Okay.
Uh,
And
so
you also have a Facebook page, you said, right?
yes, the Facebook page is also Connecting Women with God.
Okay. Well, that's
Yeah.
good. You're able to get all of them. So
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
well, Mandy, it has been great having you on the podcast, and I hope this episode really has encouraged and inspired the women listening to know that, if God really might be calling you to do something, and maybe
Mhm.
you've been saying, I can't do that, or it's too hard, or I don't have time, but God makes a way no matter what, and He showed you that.
Yep, for sure.
But it's been
Yep.
great having you, and I'll have all of your links in the show notes.
Okay, great. All right.
Thank
Thank you, Carol.